Good afternoon, everyone. And good afternoon, audience, and those who are watching us online. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to discuss today a very interesting topic. But before we do that, we will need Dr. Sunia to join us. Sabbath is one of the things that is one of the hallmarks of the Adventist Church. And IS being an Adventist institution, we struggle with a number of issues on how to keep it holy, how to observe Sabbath. And when we look at it from different cultures, we can easily get into misunderstanding. And so today, we will be looking at the Sabbath, looking at it from different cultures. And I have invited on this show a number of scholars from theology to education to business to help us understand where we come from in the Sabbath. What is really Sabbath, and how do we observe it? Not only will we going to look at it from these three fields, but we'll be looking at it from different cultures. And so at this point, I want us to introduce ourselves first, starting with Pastor Paul. If you can tell us your name, what you're doing here, and where you're from, and then you pass the microphone around.
This is Frederick Paul. I come from the Southern Asia division of the subcontinent of India, and I'm currently registered in the PhD program of Applied Theology in the seminary here at IS.
Welcome, Pastor Paul.
I'm Dolf Oberholster, coming from South Africa, and I work here at IS. I'm a vice president, and I also teach in the education department.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Dr. Dolf.
My name is Sergo Namuradze. I come from the beautiful country of Georgia, and I'm here pursuing doctoral degree, PhD in world missions.
Welcome, Pastor Sergo.
I am Hatsalmavet Venkaya. I come from the beautiful island of Mauritius, but I work for SPD. And I'm here in the PhD Intercultural Studies World Mission Department.
Welcome, Pastor Venkaya.
I'm Sunia Fukufuka. I am from the continent of Tonga. and I'm in the business department as a faculty there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sonia, and welcome. There was once I was talking to someone, and I was told that somewhere in the Middle East, I think specifically in Jerusalem, that on Sabbath, people are not allowed even to punch the button in the elevator, because that will count already against the observance of the Sabbath. And so even for us as Adventists, we have struggles to try to understand what is the proper way of dealing with Sabbath. And for that, I want us to ask the first question. What is Sabbath, and why was it created? Anyone can speak. What is Sabbath, and why was it created in the first place?
In my opinion, based on experience as a pastor for 18 years, I have realized Sabbath is just more than the quantified 24 hours time. To me, Sabbath is a regenesis. It's a new beginning. Sabbath is restoration. Sabbath is absolutely going beyond lawful duties, going beyond ceremonies. Sabbath to me, I feel, is an experience where God wants to restore me into His image. Secondly, it says, why was it created? I want to say this in two words. Again, I want to stress the word restoration and redemption, because in this lost world of sinfulness, had it not been for Sabbath, particularly in a Hindu country, in a culture like mine, where everything is against our Bible, where everything seemingly contradicts the Word of God. To me, I see Sabbath in my culture, in my own experience, as redemptive and restorative experience.
I want to pick on that before we talk with Dr. Dolph, and this is for everyone really. On the restoration process, I came across a research study, but that was a long time ago. I forgot to prepare this for today, where it shows that, and this research was not done by Christians or Adventists, but it showed that the system, our body, is set up in such a way that every 7 days, it's a cycle. And research is slowly showing that if you can rest, you can take 1 day off. Of course, they don't say it has to be Sabbath, but if you can take a day off every week, you can perform much better in your job, in your studies, than somebody who has no stop. And so I'm looking at this from the restoration perspective. Actually, even physically and mentally, there seems to be a restoration that is happening beyond even the intellectual, the spiritual one. Anyways, somebody else, I think Dr. Dolph wanted to add something maybe on the definition of Sabbath or why it was created.
I'm not coming with any formal definition. I believe it is about restoration, restoring that harmony, whether it's in ourselves, whether it's in the community, in the church. It's about restoring this harmony that God had intended. I do believe that God knew what he was doing when he made the Sabbath. Man needs the Sabbath. Okay. Even more today than what they may have needed it in the Garden of Eden. We need it. He knew what we needed, and yes, we need to take that break away from the pressures or the rat race. We need it.
I like the concept of harmony. And basically, if we go to church and we do not experience this harmony with the brothers and sisters in Christ, it defeats the purpose of the Sabbath in that case. Yes, Pastor Sergo.
Yeah, I would like to highlight another side of Sabbath, because it was given to humankind before the restoration was ever needed. As a person who have never celebrated Sabbath before I get to know Bible and Adventism, I could say Sabbath is given for pleasure and joy. And maybe oftentimes this side of Sabbath is maybe not seen well or not experienced well enough behind so many theological perceptions.
I'm glad that you brought the concept of pleasure, because we'll be addressing that. Because pleasure, it is true that Sabbath should be a delight. That's what my Bible tells me. Unfortunately, my definition of delight is different from somebody else's definition of delight, and that's the reason why we're looking at Sabbath from diverse cultures, because in different cultures, we find pleasure differently. Yes, you want to add something?
If I would continue the same idea, is God, we say, I heard many times Adventists say, we got two blessings in Garden of Eden. It's the blessing of marriage and the blessing of Sabbath. But I would, let me put in a way, like God gave us two pleasures. He gave marriage for pleasure, which unfortunately is lost in many cases. And he gave, he gave Sabbath for pleasure, not pressure. Sometimes it turns into pressure, high blood pressure. But
Thank you very much, Pastor Sergo. That's an interesting concept. But let's move to the next question. And I will want Dr. Sunia to be the first one to address this question. How is Sabbath celebrated in the continent of Tonga, as you called it?
Thank you. Please remember the continent. It's a new addition to the globe. Yes, how is Sabbath celebrated at home? We have a constitution at home, and the Sabbath is an act of law in our country. So there is no commerce on Sabbath. There is no planes landing or leaving, no buses running, no taxis, no bakeries, no business. Frankly, there's nothing that runs. The only difference between the Seventh-day Adventist Sabbath in Tonga and the Seventh-day Adventist Sabbath, the Adventist worship, is the sunset, because everyone worships on the seventh day of the week. Catholics, So it's a good place to go to when the trial and tribulation comes. For tourists, they are allowed, given the understanding of they are from different places in the world, but they are only allowed within the hotels that they are staying in. There are bars that are open during the Sabbath, but only in the hotels for the tourists that are there. Those are the businesses that open to cater for foreigners. Wow. But from 12 o'clock on what we call preparation day, Togonaki, and Sunday, your concept of Sunday, we don't have that in the Tongan calendar. We have Sapate, Sabbath. So from 12 o'clock midnight to 12 o'clock midnight, there is, well, if the police catches you kicking a soccer ball as they do on IS, you'll be in jail. That's to put it simply as that. Yes.
Now,
okay.
that is something that we never knew. I've never heard of a country where actually Sabbath is legal. Israel also. All right. That gives us a very interesting perspective. Let's travel all the way south of where Dr. Sunia comes from to Mauritius Island. Do you have something like unique in Mauritius in how you observe Sabbath there?
Mauritius has been influenced by the French, culture. So we basically we follow the French way. It's a secular country in France, but in Mauritius we are a mixture of cultures, of peoples. However, we view Sabbath, we experience it in terms of relationship.
Okay.
For us, Sabbath is a family affair.
Okay.
Not just, it's first of all the family reunion with God, and family reunion with the church, and it's very familiar.
Can you expand on that? Because I think many cultures, people here, we come from cultures where Sabbath, it's the time when you are really with the loved ones and so on. I want you to expand on that. What do you mean by family relationships on Sabbath?
It starts like the sunset. The family will gather together, so worship is very important. So we have very special food, normally on Friday night. My mother used to cook the best food, like
of course.
And in my culture, we don't really fast on Sabbath because we say that it's a moment of joy, happiness, and we fast other days, but not really on the Sabbath.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a moment of gathering and spiritual, but also social gathering in the sense that we are together, close together, and eat together.
That is interesting. Pastor Paul, how I know that India has very small percentage of Adventists. How do you make it, how is it celebrated there?
I have to honestly confess, I've had some great culture shock when I landed here in IS, being an Indian. I want to just get back in the second half. For us, Sabbath, I've grown all these years, exactly before the sunset, the food has to be cooked. And I want to tell you, those of them who are planning to go for a mission trip, if they see any Adventist or pastor cooking, the members will bring sand and put it into the vessel. It is highly forbidden for any Adventist to cook on Sabbath.
We will be talking about cooking in another show, but it's interesting that that's how you address that in India. What's something else that is particular? How you celebrate?
Okay, coming back to that, there are two things we actually do. That is basically a reunion of the family. Okay. Most of the times, family doesn't get to spend time. So coming from the family perspective, this Sabbath is really a celebration in the sense where we have the physical reunion. Number two, it's also a celebration because that's the only way, the only day on which we go and reclaim the backslidden. For us, it's a joy. We try to identify, even on that day, who has not come to Sabbath, or in other words, who has not really been keeping up in the faith. So this is a day we try to primarily focus, where we try to reclaim. And that's the day of celebration for us in that sense.
I'm really tempted to travel to Africa now. all the way to South Africa, and hear that from the Southern African perspective. How is Sabbath celebrated in South Africa? I know one thing that we know about South Africa, it's an extremely diverse country. In fact, I would say on the whole continent of Africa, South Africa is the most diverse one. You find people of Indian descent, we find people from European descent, you find people of, those who will say really African descent, and many others. I know we had people from Latin America there too. How does this diversity work together in the celebration of the Sabbath in South Africa, Dr. Dolph?
Well, I think you can imagine there are different practices in the same country. So, I can't speak about every single culture. But I will say this idea of family also comes very strong. Of course, Sabbath morning, we all go to church. That is the expected thing. You don't miss church, not even once. Although amongst the other religions and the other denominations, you will find people only go to church when they feel like it. But typically, among the Adventists, they will go to church every Sabbath very faithfully. Then after church service, you'll find that they might have potlucks or eating together, but it tends to be more close friends or family. It wouldn't be necessarily church-wide or big groups. It tends to be smaller groups that would eat together. Then in the afternoon, it depends which culture you're in. I grew up in a different culture when I was a child than when I was a teenager. But it depends where you are, but it often is going out into nature. You want to get away from all the man-made things, from where the houses are, and you want to go out for a hike, or even if it's just a drive out in the countryside, in the mountains, or walking by a stream. And even if there is some physical exertion, that is not frowned upon as such. You're out in nature, restoring harmony. That's really what it's about.
Thank you so much. One concept that is coming out here is family. And this is something that we may also want to cultivate here at IAS, that on Sabbath day, we should really reconnect, given that we are very busy here at IAS. And I want us to go to the next one, and Pastor Venkaya will be the first one to answer this question. What is the meaning of Sabbath in an academic setting like this, with a lot of assignments? I don't want to pinpoint people here who are giving you a hard time, but we know everybody is busy. In fact, we have one student who composed a song on how we will all die busy. We don't want to die busy. How do we keep Sabbath in an academic setting like IAS?
One thing is that I'm not preaching like regularly as I used to be on Sabbath, but however, I seize the opportunity to be with my family. During the week, I'm working very hard, really hard, sometimes not sleeping very well. So on Sabbath, I tend to sleep more and to rest, but also to connect with the family, with God, take more time. Like when I'm reading, I will read devotional books, my Bible, so that I can really enjoy. It's not in the academic sense of things. And that's personally what I think.
Okay. Pastor Sergo.
Well, I would add only, here in academic settings, it's so different from pastoral ministry. 6 days, we don't listen, we read. But on Sabbath, I decided I will not read, I'll only listen. So this is my constitution.
Thank you so much. Pastor Frederick Paul, how should we keep Sabbath in the academic setting?
I would just like to add an appendix to that. I have never learned to appreciate Sabbath unless I registered for Hebrew and Greek in the seminary. I also have to understand, I want to make some honest confessions as a pastor, as a student here. I'm afraid whether I started to be sacrilegious or desecrating the Sabbath, because unconsciously the assignments and all these things keep bogging you at the back of your mind. To address this issue, I'm so very happy. I think this is very pertinent an issue, because I believe in an academic setting, I'm not here only to inform my brain. This is more about my personal relationship. So I would like to look at a relational level, so that the Sabbath will be like rejuvenation, repairing, getting back on the relational level to God. That's my perspective.
Thank you so much. I want to ask Dr. Dolph, given that you are Vice President for the Academic Administration, and of course you want to make sure that we have the highest quality of education. But on the other side, when we're trying to, and we run as faculty, we run in the challenge of trying to follow other universities outside, and therefore giving sometimes more than what the students can handle, and therefore not having enough time. And sometimes it can really create a new meaning on Sabbath observance. So what is the meaning of Sabbath? What do you expect from our community here on Sabbath day?
You know, I think I will just repeat what I said at the beginning. God knew what we needed when he made the Sabbath.
Yes.
We need that break. Whether you're a faculty member, a staff member, a student, doesn't matter who you are, you need that break. And you know, from the IS administration, we would say you need that break. The break from the regular activity of the week. It doesn't mean sleeping 24 hours, but it means focusing your mind on relational aspects, you know, on those kind of things, away from the pressure, the work, focusing on something different.
You know, you remind me from what you just said there. You remind me something that somebody was saying somewhere. I don't remember exactly where I was. It was definitely outside of the Philippines. And somebody was saying, I really love the Sabbath day because on Sabbath day, the professors call me brother and sister. It's no longer part of, you know, Dr. such and such. For the first time in a week, we are called brothers and sisters in Christ. And I think this is the harmony aspect of the Sabbath. Let's move to another question. And this one will go to Dr. Sunia as the first person, because you're the only one who comes from a country where they actually have, the government has a law that you have to stop from working on Sabbath day. Everybody in the nation. That is really impressive. But have you seen some concerns here at IAS? When you're walking around, with your family, I always see you with your children, and you're walking, and you see something being done, and you feel like, oh, wow, okay, well, this doesn't look like Sabbath. What is it?
I don't have concerns about how other people keep their Sabbath, especially on this campus. And the reason for that is I have the understanding that we are all different in our maturity in Jesus. Therefore, our understanding of what it means to be holy separates us. So I don't have a problem with others keeping their Sabbath. I have a problem as a parent teaching my children the Sabbath, because there is a dissonance between what I teach at home and what they see. All right? So usually every Sabbath, I am faced with a question, but so-and-so is playing, is this, why do we have to sit in the house and read? Or so I don't have a challenge with others. I mean, for me personally, I would like to just, can I jump back?
Sure, go ahead.
I never responded to what is the Sabbath and why was it created. The Sabbath was made for men. Well, that's Jesus' answer. But to go beyond that, 6 days thou shalt labor, which comes back to question 2 and 3, right? And that 6 days you are laboring. But on the seventh day, it's let me use Heschel's word. It's a time not to dominate space, but for God to dominate you. That's what Sabbath is.
That is very well
right?
said.
Yes, it's a time to be dominated by divine power. And that time, that period of time, the Sabbath, when it comes to me and my family, if you don't notice it, we don't usually turn up on Friday night unless we have a role to play. On Friday night, we study the doctrines in the Bible at home with the boys, right? And that practice started when my oldest son said to me, I want to be baptized. And I thought, let me get a past, and I thought, well, let me study my Bible with you, right? So we have shifted from there. And now we are putting things into place in the Sabbath to keep them occupied. The advantage of coming from Tonga is that everyone does the same thing, all right? Unfortunately, here they see, especially their friends, doing something, and there's a dissonance. So my challenge is not how others keep their Sabbath, right? My challenge is just to get my children to understand what Sabbath means to me.
I think Dr. Sunia is coming on this from the qualitative research perspective. I understand. Let's go to somebody else. Pastor Sergo, I know you come from an interesting country, Georgia. I think the population, what is the population of Adventists in Georgia?
That's the hardest question to answer.
I know you know the answer.
350 according to church rolls.
We have 250 members, Adventists, in the whole country of Georgia.
And my children and their peers are the first, second generation Adventists.
Wow. Okay, so how do you do it differently? Because that means it is predominantly a different religion. So from what you have seen there and you come here, what concerns do you see?
Maybe Sabbath observance is not something that shocked us the most. Like the very first day, what really shocked my kids is a man hanging laundry outside. That was even greater shock.
Okay, you don't do that in Georgia?
Yes.
Okay.
Not men.
Okay. Oh, not men. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, something else?
Yeah, so Sabbath observance, to my understanding, it doesn't mean that everybody should do the same things on Sabbath. I like how Jews, according to Jews, they believe that only God worked on Sabbath. There is an evidence in John 5:17, when Jesus said that my Father works until now, and I'm also working, and that caused him to be accused in blasphemy. So I like how Rabbi once expressed that he said, I work 6 days and I rest on Sabbath to see how God works. Wow. And there are different ways to do that.
Thank you so much. I think we have already started addressing the next question. So let's go to that one to try to really go in the heart of the issues that Dr. Sunia was trying to avoid. What did you think about these activities on Sabbath? Sports, playing soccer, volleyball, basketball, politics talk. Men, we love politics. Completion of academic assignments, especially if it is an assignment for Greek or Hebrew. After all, it's for the Bible. What are your thoughts about these activities and others that are similar to these? Dr. Dolph. And then we go to Pastor Venkaya.
Well, to me, you're talking about me personally.
Yeah.
For me, those are all do not fit with Sabbath observance. Each single one of those. Sports doesn't fit in my culture or with me. Not on Sabbath. Politics talk is not appropriate. We really need to take our mind away from the worldly concerns. Or completion of academic assignments, those are the pressures of the week. Why am I trying to bring it into Sabbath? God gave me Sabbath to take a break from all of those things.
Yeah, but some come up with an explanation that, well, this is for my, preaching class. It's still in the Bible. I'm going to read the verses. I'm also studying the Bible while completing these assignments. So what do you say about that?
I say the same thing. Even if I'm preparing something for class, that is of a very spiritual nature, I will not do it on Sabbath. I will do it during the week. So to me it is it for work? Is it part of my weekly work? Or is it not? That's what where I make the distinction.
You remind me of a story that somebody was telling us just a few weeks ago, I think, or a couple months ago, where there was a discussion of two men. One came and he had his binoculars and he was going to watch birds on Sabbath afternoon, and he saw this other man. He was snorkeling and watching the fish, and the first one says, you should not be doing that on Sabbath. You're diving and all this thing. It's not right to do this on Sabbath. And the other one said, well, why do you have the binoculars? I said, well, I'm going to do bird watching. I said, well, I'm doing fish watching. You're doing bird watching. And so it's the same. It's sports. For me, when I see you taking your binoculars and going there in the mountains, you are hiking, that is wrong. And the other one is looking at the other ones and saying, listen, you are diving. So from his perspective, it is wrong. And so I don't know. Are there some sports that are better than others on Sabbath? Let's think about that after Pastor Venkaya gives his opinion.
I think this is a very tough question to answer. You know why? Because we have what we call the revelation of God, the Bible, the revelation, and then we have a theology, theologies. What are theologies? Theologies are interpretation of that revelation. However, the theologies that we have are tainted by our worldviews, cultures, by our cultural lenses. Each one of us will interpret that revelation differently. And the big issue that I find here on the campus, and since we are talking here, those activities we know that, okay, we should not do them. The problem is that we are focusing more on the don'ts, what we should not do, but not how to live, how to experience, what to do on the Sabbath. We face the same issues also in the church. When people talk about Adventists, they know Adventists, but those people, they don't eat pork, they don't work on the Sabbath, they don't do this, they don't do that. They don't know us about what we do. And our focus has been on the cognitive aspect of Sabbath, but we don't know how to live it, what to do.
Thank you so much. I want to go back to him, and then I'll go to you, Dr. Sunia. I want to go back to Pastor Sergo. You said that Sabbath is a pleasure. Sports is definitely pleasurable. Especially if you've been working, studying, writing papers the whole week. Man, that soccer kick might actually be good for you on Sabbath. What do you say about that?
It is interesting that God intentionally didn't give us the list in the Bible, what is prohibited and what is not in doing, because we human beings tend to create such lists. And I remember one professor told his experience while the excavation in Israel. And early morning, he heard shouting and screaming. Somebody was running toward him. It was a Hasid. Hasid is a traditional Jew who keeps everything. You know, they wear black suits and hat. So he was running toward this group who were doing excavation, and was telling them something that they couldn't understand. So he just asked them, please follow me. So a few men ran after him, and they ran, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 kilometers away. So this guy, this Hasid, this Jew, righteous Jew, he brought the group to his house. And the professor tells me what we saw is his child, about maybe 5-6 years old child, is shouting and screaming and crying because his finger stuck in the door.
Oh.
But this was Sabbath morning. And the father, because of Sabbath observance, could not allow himself to pull out his finger.
Oh, wow.
It was a very easy job. So what they did, they just pulled his finger out to give him relief. So I asked myself, what kind of Sabbath, what is the perspective this child will grow, what kind of perspective of Sabbath this child will have. So sometimes, yes, I agree that maybe sports and politics talk. We talk politics on Sabbath. We just say that we shouldn't, but we speak about church politics. we speak about Donald Trump and the news. It is just not so much observable. But if I kick the ball, then everybody see that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the question about this kind of questions are equal to the questions like how many times the husband should kiss the wife in order to make sure that she feels that he loves her. So I don't know, is it a quantity or a quality?
Thank you so much, Pastor Sergo. Let's go to Dr. Sunia, and then we'll go to the next question.
I think confession is good for the soul. For those of you who love sports, especially when there is a sporting event, the World Cup soccer, World Cup cricket, the World Cup, whatever the sport is, there are certain sports that rhymes from wherever you come from. The Sabbath, you may sit in church. Well, let me just use myself. When it's the World Cup, I am seated in church and I may pay attention to what's there, but the brain keeps going back and forth with worldly things. One of the things I have done now with just in practice to avoid myself thinking about those things, if it's during a sporting event, I don't see Facebook. Because people post news on Facebook, right? So when these things are running, no more Facebook. The only reason my Facebook is open on Sabbath is to check my president's chat messages to me that we have a sundown, we have practice on Sabbath and so forth. But let me bring this question a little bit closer. We are supposed to have an elders meeting today at 3:30, right? And the discussion in the elders meeting is not spiritual discussion. Let me be clear. It's about the business of the church. All right? It's about the business of the church. But there are activities that we culturally defined as good activities and activities that we do not define as good activities. I said earlier that I don't mind how others keep the Sabbath. And the reason why I said that because our growth in Jesus is all different. Right? I said that earlier. Now, I need to say that with, I don't mind coming out with my children and spending an afternoon outside in the hot sun, enjoying, watching them running around. The reason why I don't do that is their mind is not mature enough to know that playing on the Sabbath isn't something that should not be done. Until they reach that mindset, then we'll go there. One more example. In Tennessee, 2015, when we arrived, it was snowing. The school had a program that they will come up to a hill on the side before sunset, and they were sliding down from the top down in the snow. And after the program was done, the sun set, they went and had a lit fire, campfire, and they were singing all songs and so forth. And my boys kept asking, can we go, can we go? I said, no. Next morning we went. So I'm just saying, it's very difficult when we talk about the practice of the Sabbath. It is very difficult because I'm pretty sure everyone can rationalize their perspective on the Sabbath. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sunia. I'm going to ask each one of you to give us your opinion in 15 seconds or less. Are we allowed to travel on Sabbath? How about traveling to preach and we have to pay the fare of the bus? Should we do that? Sometimes we may go preach and there is no food there. And you have to travel back and somebody's selling something on the bus. Should we help ourselves on that? 15 seconds or less. Let's start with Pastor Frederick.
Honestly speaking, I was supposed to travel this morning, but my wife compelled me. Today is International Women's Day of Prayer. You have to be here. I am a pastor. I am an evangelist. That's my call, my profession. I want to say it very quickly. I think the Bible is very clear and gives a sharp distinction between the letter and the Spirit. The most important thing is what is really important. Sometimes we are caught up so much in the letter and we leave the Spirit. Are we allowed to travel on Sabbath? I would ask myself, what is my intent? What is my purpose? We are sometimes, as students, we are called to preach in several churches around. I have to go to Manila. Sometimes I get up at 4 o'clock. We go there. Surely I will go if it is for my preaching appointment. But if somebody is going to ask me, I know, friend, you're struggling, why don't you come here? I will give you an Indian meal. If it's Sabbath, I would definitely say, can you wait until sunset? Something like that. And how about paying the bus fare? I think I am one of the poorest students who does not have a car. All of them have a car except me on the dais. So there is no other way for me except to travel by bus. And definitely, I think God understands if I pay my bus fare. But if I was given a chance, there was prepaid ticket, definitely I would buy.
Thank you.
So I would like to say the intent, God looks at the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law. And what? Because if a donkey falls inside a ditch on Sabbath, definitely I will not wait. This morning I want to say quickly, we're very happy to see the International Women's Day of Prayer. All of a sudden, 9 students showed from AUP. And the pastor announced, today there is no potluck. So we don't on Sabbath. I have to say, we just went, I told my wife, she quickly fixed something. And I think God understands. I don't believe in lighting the store on Sabbath, but I also believe in the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law.
Thank you so much. 15 seconds or less. What do you think? Any of those?
Okay, it depends on the kind of travel. Because, obviously, if you're traveling in order to serve, to minister, then, it fits more in with the spirit of the Sabbath. Secondly, it also depends on what is in your mind. If I'm having to travel on a bus where there's a movie and I cannot avoid seeing that
Yes, we
movie,
have seen those.
I would have great difficulty traveling. I would do whatever I can to avoid traveling on that bus on that Sabbath.
Thank you so much, Pastor Sergo.
Yeah. Let me put my question into 15 seconds and the second part into less. So, this question reminded me the occasion at GC 2010. All the hotels and restaurants were trying to attract Adventists for their businesses. There were vegetarian food, there was even a photo of Ellen White in one of the restaurants. But one really attracted my attention. Pay Friday, eat Saturday. They know how to attract Adventists. I would, so the part that goes to less is God gave us common sense. So Satan tries to take Sabbath out from common sense and show people that it is very weird and unacceptable thing. And we shouldn't go into that way.
Thank you so much. Pastor Venkaya, 15 seconds.
And the purpose of why you're traveling. For me, I used to travel to drive like 4 hours, 5 hours to go to the church that I need to preach.
Yes.
So it's a work of necessity. And I think if it is a work of necessity, work of love, there's no issue about traveling. God is not putting my name in the list to go to hell or something like that. If I'm doing a work of necessity, the purpose for which I'm doing it. And as for buying food on the Sabbath, I prefer to fast instead of buying the food, or I will prepare, I will get food. However, if there's somebody who is like ill, sick, or having some weaknesses, and I will buy food for that person for him to eat, because it's a work of necessity.
Thank you so much, Pastor Venkaya. Dr. Sonia.
All of the above. 15 seconds. Yeah.
All right, thank you. We come to the last question. What can be done to make Sabbath more enjoyable for the men of IS? Let's start with whoever is ready. Keep it to like maybe 30 seconds.
30 seconds. This is my humble plea. This is my hue and my cry. I would be very happy as a student to request this, to put this out here in this forum publicly. I would be happy to have one of my seminary professors call me And I would be happy if he calls about 3 or 4 seminary students to his, at least once in a quarter, need not necessarily be. And I would be happy to have a wonderful, living, loving relationship so that I will know, that I'm able to relate to my professor. I think it would be very meaningful, relevant, and pertinent. Secondly, I also feel at least once in a while, we all should involve in outreach. There are many of us pastors here, 4 years. There are many of them who do not go anywhere except to the library. And I can say most of the pastors have lost their gift. So I would want them to be in the momentum, to be kinetic, so that they will also have an involvement, so that it will be an enjoyable experience.
Thank you. Dr. Dov?
Okay, for me it would be less meetings, more family time,
Yes.
and more ministry, more
Yes.
serving, focusing on other people.
Thank you so much, Pastor Sergo.
Amen.
Oh, that's it. All right, Pastor Venkaya.
The same. Sometimes we focus on the negatives on the Sabbath. Let's focus on what is positive and enjoy the Sabbath.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sunya.
Let me be honest. Right?
Yes.
Usually for those of us who are married, who have spouses, and especially spouses who are not students or who do not work, the Sabbath, hello, either Satan doesn't want me to speak or the Lord doesn't want me to speak. Sabbath is usually a day that I allow my spouse to be herself, what she wants to do. Does she want to, whatever it is, and the reason is for 6 days of the week, I'm busy, and that day, let me handle the household chores and do other things at home. And when she's happy, everything in the house is happy.
I think we need some clapping on that, right?
I think anything that makes the family, as Dov say, come closer together, as Pastor says, for us as a faculty and students come closer together, any such activities would be very good to do on the Sabbath day.
Thank you so much. Let's put our hands together for our team. Thank you very much for what you have taught us today. And for our viewers there on online or TV, we want to thank you very much for being with us. We have learned basically that Sabbath was made for us, for our pleasure, for our enjoyment, for rest, for developing a harmony, reconnecting with our families, and reconnecting with our brothers and sisters in Christ, and ministering to other people outside of our church, outside of our campus. We will be having another program, and we'll be looking at the Sabbath from the women's perspective. Thank you so much, and we hope we can see you again soon. Thank you.